the trust that our customers have or that our employees have with us is our most valuable asset. I'm like, okay, well, that is your brand.
If you put time on your side fast, if you can have the 3, 5, 8, 10 years to transition something like this, and you put time on your side, you do a lot of people a lot of good, and it's very doable.
Listening to them, hearing them, hearing their fears, addressing those fears.
Welcome to the Business Transition Roadmap. My name is Elizabeth Ledoux, and through my years, I have seen how communities thrive when business succession and transition are done well. Me and my team at the Transition Strategists have been helping business owners develop and implement transition strategies for over 30 years. And on this show, we want to help you by giving you the roadmap to a healthy business transition. Let's get started.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Business Transition Roadmap podcast. Today, I am excited to introduce you to Meghan Lynch. She's the CEO of 6 Point Strategy, and this is a really interesting firm. It's a brand strategy firm, and what they do is they help multi-generational family-owned businesses navigate the idea of growth, succession, and transition. And one of the cool things I think she does is they're able to turn a company's and a person's reputation into what they call a strategic asset. So we've had just a quick conversation earlier today together about the internal communications, the external communications, what has worked for some of the clients that she has worked with, and also maybe some of the things that did not work that we also can learn from. So anyway, Meghan, thanks for being here today and welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Elizabeth. I'm excited to have this conversation. I think it's great. Appreciate you having me on.
It's fun. So why don't we start by just telling a little bit about you and, what brought you into this line of work? How'd you get here?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'll try to kind of give the short version of it, but I'm not from a family business. Oftentimes you find family business practitioners or advisors who come from family business. My dad was an Episcopal priest. My mom was a teacher. Like, we did not speak business in my house. So I was the odd duck that went out and got a marketing degree and ended up going into marketing. And through that, I met a couple of folks who really became mentors to me. And when they started their own firm in 2007, I joined them. I was like, oh my gosh, like, I'm so excited you guys are doing this. Let's do it. And I didn't quite realize that they were on the tail end of their career and that I was basically their succession plan, that they're like, yeah, come on, let's do it. And so when they started talking about retirement, not too long, I felt like we were just kind of getting our feet under us. And they started talking about retirement and succession. And I panicked and ended up joining a family business center near me, and to just basically educate myself about what does succession look like? How do we do this? What can we learn from other people who've done it before? And the more time I spent with that group, the more time I was like, oh, like, these are my people. Like, they're so values driven, so relationship driven, just really, and also dealing with so much, that it made me realize that the family businesses that we were already serving at 6 Point, we could probably serve more intentionally if we educated ourselves more about family business as a discipline and a thing that a lot is known about, and kind of shift our practice to, just be more intentional around, keep the brand strategy piece of what we do, but really layer over it kind of family business best practices. So focusing 6 Point on family business was really my next generation evolution of what my mentors, David and Marcia, started when they started the business.
Wow, that's a great story. And isn't it fun how sometimes, going and exposing yourself to something because of an event or something that happens in your life really opens up a door that you didn't know was there.
Yeah. And it's been amazing. I've never regretted the choice, like the deeper I get into the world and the community, the more I fall in love with our clients, and the more I fall in love with just this world of family business. It's got a lot of amazing people in it.
It sure does. So, as you discovered and thought about layering over family business in this marketing strategy, just for our audience, what did you learn, and what did that mean to you when you looked at that? What's the difference?
Yeah, so I think the biggest difference that I see is that what works on paper or at a big, a Fortune 500 company, or even in like a venture funded startup, does not work when you are talking about a generational business that somebody is coming into, that they didn't start, and that they need to keep going after them. You just make fundamentally different choices when you're talking about positioning, when you're talking about reputation, when you're talking about strategy and growth opportunity. And so really, like, kind of at its most basic, I feel like the biggest thing that we do is kind of introduce a lot of family businesses to this idea that brand is reputation. Because oftentimes when I say brand strategy, they're like, brand strategy, like, we don't need that. That doesn't apply to us. And then I'll say, okay, well, what does apply to you? Oh, our reputation is the most valuable asset. The trust that our customers have or that our employees have with us is our most valuable asset. I'm like, okay, well, that is your brand. So,
right there.
So it's a little bit of like a language thing and an education thing. And then also making room in the process for the emotional piece of the decision making that I think is actually the secret sauce of family business. The fact that they do not make the same decisions that you would make in business school. They just think a little bit differently, think more creatively, think more relationship oriented.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it is so interesting. So when you, in our work, it's, if you imagine the transitioner leaving and the successor is coming in, and it's a transfer of basically relationships. And these relationships sometimes have been built with the transitioner for, 10, 20, 30. We have one client that he started his business 50 years ago. And so these relationships have been there over many, many, many years. How do you help people transition that trust and that connection from one owner or one leader to another when they're so far apart in age and experience? How do you do that?
Yeah, it's such a great question, because I think like that question is the thing that like weighs on people. Like, it just sounds impossible. Like, how can I possibly take 50 years of industry insight and reputation and trust that I've built, relationship by relationship, decision by decision over 50 years, and just hand that off to some kid who doesn't have any of that? Like,
kid who's 40,
right? Kid who's probably 65 or something.
I
know. But I think that the biggest thing that I try to, again, I think sometimes like a language and a thinking about it is helpful, because to them it feels like this impossible move. But this is brand strategy, right? Like positioning a company, building relationship, building reputation. Like, this is a known process. And so I think what feels so different is just the fact that it feels so personal, right? And like that piece makes it feel more weighty than if I was just talking about some company that I didn't own. But businesses transfer, leaders transfer trust all the time. And so what we just try to bring in is kind of like space for like, yes, this does feel impossible. Like, you are not wrong and you are not alone. Like, it's absolutely true. And also, there's a process. Like, we can make this transferable. It takes time, it takes discipline, it takes a structure, but it's totally doable. And so just kind of like walking them through a process of how we're going to get from this thing that feels just completely way too big to how we're going to start eating that elephant together and moving towards that is huge. It's kind of like half the battle is just getting them to see it as a possible thing to make progress on. And so, yeah, I think like just kind of acknowledging it is step number one.
Step one. Well, and the thing about it, it is a challenge to be able to do that. And, bottom line, whether it looks hard or it doesn't, but usually it looks like it's a pretty big deal to transfer all that, knowledge, wisdom, trust, and really get other people looking to the successor versus looking to the transitioner. And, a lot of times in a private business, when people identify with the business, they identify with the owner so many times. So yeah, but bottom line is you are going to leave vertically or horizontally one way or the other. Like, this is going to happen. It's going to get done someday. The cool thing about what you're talking about is being able to do it intentionally, be able to do it. And, that I think in timelines that, these business transitions that are really successful, if you put time on your side and you get ahead of it, and you can have even 2 years is very fast. If you can have the 3, 5, 8, 10 years to transition something like this, and you put time on your side, you do a lot of people a lot of good, and it's very doable. Very, very doable.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the thing is like, it is not something that happens overnight. You cannot do it in 12 months and just, make that switch. But when you do have time, you can be very intentional and do some practical things like, start to systematize and write down some of the stories, language, messaging that's kind of all living in somebody's head, and start to put that down, start to create some decision, how do decisions get made? It can be really hard for a founder to articulate all of the things that they are just doing by gut when they're making decisions. But those can be pulled out of them. Like, it's hard for them to articulate it, but you can ask good questions and start to pull that out and start to put it into a system that then other people can access. And I think the other big thing is, and I feel like it's always the answer in family business, is communication, right? That oftentimes, you talked about kind of like what goes wrong. And I feel like the biggest thing that I see people do that tanks this is that they won't talk about it out of fear. So they have some really long-standing customer, and in the back of their mind, they are terrified that when they leave, this customer is going to leave. It's been critical to the business. The whole thing's going to kind of unravel. So they don't tell them that they're planning on transitioning, that they're planning on leaving, that they, it only gets shared after everything is settled, and they're hearing it after the fact. And it's just not a respectful way to communicate. I think it goes back to like, how would you want to be treated, right? That these critical relationships, it's not, I think, again, the difference between family business brand strategy and kind of transitioning this trust is that it's highly personal, that it's one-on-one conversations with key people over time, listening to them, hearing them, hearing their fears, addressing those fears, and giving, as you said, time for them to have that initial feeling of like, no, I love you. Like, don't go, I trust you, and give them time to see the next generation stepping up and continuity happening, and even some maybe new energy or new things that are beneficial to them. So I think like that's kind of like mistake number one, is just feeling that fear of this key customer, key relationship is going to be angry about this, and making that assumption, and then never giving them a chance to come to the table and kind of rise to the occasion and be a partner in it with you, because they probably want you to succeed and the transition to succeed as much as you do.
Yeah, absolutely. God, you brought up so many, many, many points, Meghan. A couple are, one is there's so many mindsets around leaving, and worries and fears about what's everybody going to think. And if I say anything as the owner founder, then, will people leave? Will they get uncomfortable? Will they start looking for another job? Will they wonder, what's going to happen to them? Will they feel like they're not going to be cared for? The stability goes away. All these different things. And then equality and fairness. And, will somebody want something from me that I'm not ready to give? And so I'm just not going to say anything. And those are all feelings and mindsets, because most of that stuff is future thinking, and it isn't true. It's not true today. And so the other thing that comes up on my side is that without a plan or a strategy or a roadmap or something, it's pretty difficult if you don't know what you want as an owner, founder, or as a successor also, right? Both sides. If you don't know what you're really trying to achieve together and on your own, it's pretty hard to put together a story or, and that communication. So I would think that the people that you work with, that they have to be engaged in trying to figure out where they're going and at least have some roadmap in front of them that they're looking at. Is that true?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one of the reasons why the work we do is not done in a vacuum. It's always done alongside, their succession planning, their transition planning, all the personal work that they need to be doing in the background, all the structural governance work that they need to be doing. And then we're sort of this external facing part, kind of like, in my mind, almost like the easiest piece of like, okay, well, you've been putting all this work into the succession plan. Now we kind of wrap it up in a bow and turn it into a story that you can tell externally, turn it into a system that you can help to make all this trust and reputation that you've built over so many years actually valuable in the transition and actually turn into something that can be passed and handed on as opposed to something that's living in your head. So,
Right.
Yeah, we're sort of like part of this ecosystem that's happening, but there's a lot of like really hard, deep work that everybody has to be doing in order to be able to tell that succinct story, to your point.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about, internal communication, which would be kind of communication inside of the business to employees and vendors and those kinds of people, right? I guess that would be sort of internal, anybody that supplies whatever you're doing. And then there's the external, right? There's the world out there and potentially your potential customers or clients and also existing. Talk a little bit about the importance of both and how do they differ?
Yeah. So I think, particularly for internal, I think that the biggest difference is that people are probably already thinking about this a lot, way more than the founder would like to admit. Externally, probably not so much. Like people are not, they may have some assumptions about what's going on, but they're not thinking, it doesn't affect their day-to-day lives about, what this business vendor partner, customer does all that much. So it's not kind of day-to-day top of mind. But for the team, I think one of the key things to understand is that people are making up a story in their head in the absence of a story. It's true internally and externally, but I think internally it's even more important. And so you don't have to, a lot of people are, again, succession is very personal. It's very complex. You want to be careful about who you tell and when. At the same time, I think that there are things that you can start to communicate, which is, we are thinking about succession, or the goal of this company is to continue to be a generational company, or some broad things that you can say that help to kind of just give people like a box for the story that they're doing so that they don't start making up things that are like totally not true, that they're going to sell the business, that somebody's going to come in from the outside, that private equity's coming in, they're going to shut us down and we're going to lose our job. People make up all kinds of stories.
That's right.
And So I think the big thing is to kind of figure out like what are the pieces of the narrative that I do feel confident about, that I can share, and that give people kind of a broad sense of what we're doing, a sense of vision. And I think as long as people have a vision and they know what mountain they're climbing, they're much more relaxed than if it feels like, okay, we're wandering around in the woods and we have no compass, no plan. Like there's nothing that we
Yeah.
can.
Well, and then people, they start spinning up, you're wandering around in the forest and they start spinning up. Oh my gosh, there's a noise over there. Oh my gosh, it's probably a bear. Oh my gosh, I'm probably going to die. Right.
Exactly.
And the story just keeps on scaling up and up until you're totally panicked.
Yeah.
I better go get another job. Right.
Exactly.
I better go get another job. They're bringing in private equity and I definitely am never going to work for that. Whatever that story is, it just gets so big. So having the ability to make sure that as a leader, that you're not just, that one, you're doing reflection for yourself, right? Understanding what you want. That's kind of step one. Two, being solid enough in it that you at least can get started. You may not know everything, but you get started and you do know some things. You start to put together the right team, bring in the right people, communicate what you do know and want to, what's strategically sound. And then, for me, over my 30 years, these succession transitions that work are long and they're kind of fun. Just for me, I started mine 2 years before I found my potential successor, right? Then brought her in, which took another year to talk and decide what we wanted. And now we're a year into our first year together. So we're 4 years in already. I am. And it seems like it's gone by so quickly, but it's been comfortable. So as you walk through in your brand, in this strategy and your branding, and it's kind of almost like a rebrand. It's a complete shift in branding from one person to another while keeping the foundation strong, right? So you still have the business, you've got all that, but you're shifting from one leader to another. That takes time. So how long do you typically work with a company and a group?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, it varies. To your point, the more time, the better. We have some clients who, we've been working with them for 15, 18 years. So we're, as they continue to evolve, it's like they just get through one transition and then something changes in the market or something changes in the family. And then we're almost, again, doing another rebirth of what's happening. So it's definitely a long-term game. Usually like a minimum of 24 to 36 months is ideal for a succession transition plan where we have something that we can affect the trajectory of the story that's being told. We can affect the value of the company and kind of the brand and reputation as an asset in the business, and kind of thinking about it as something that can be valued, that can be made more valuable over time. Again, whether they're doing an internal transition and you want whatever you pass on to be as valuable and as strong as possible, or whether they're actually exiting the business and there's new ownership coming in and this becomes a point for the company and the family to be able to get kind of, all this hard work and this blood, sweat, and tears put into this reputation and this trust to actually see a monetary value with that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and there is a lot of value for businesses, sometimes this brand strategy can be seen as, it's absolutely, to me, it's not as an expense as much as it's an investment, because keeping your clients, I'm thinking of a story, this was probably 10 or 15 years ago. We worked with, it was a financial services company, and the owner wanted and was ready to get out, wanted to leave the business in one employee's hands, which worked out really well. And, but how important the story was we worked with them and they worked with a marketing type firm that was working with them and knew their firm, to come up with this beautiful story. And they had a whole strategy of who they were going to tell first and who they were going to tell second and who they were going to tell third. And then when they were going to do a general announcement and what each one of those was going to be like, and whether some were in person and some weren't. And when they went through that transition, they didn't, for reasons of transition, lose any clients. They lost 0. So if you think about the value that a strategy like this can bring to a company, if you can keep your employees and keep them focused and happy, and you can keep your clients, and not only keep your clients, but enhance your relationship with them while you're doing it and spending all the time, you can actually add value by investing in something like this.
Exactly. And I think what I find sort of interesting, and I think to kind of go back to like, what do people get wrong, is that it usually comes from a good place, is that they think like, the way I'm adding value to this business is by being the steward of these relationships, by being this keeper of the trust and the stories and all of those things. So it's like all of these things that they're doing that they feel like are helping the business. When it comes to transition and succession, it almost has the opposite effect of like all of those things of being the person for all of those things and having them all live with one person is actually the thing that hurts the business in transition. And so the job is to kind of like, it also becomes like a behavior and a mindset change that needs to happen of like, oh, right, how I am of service to this company, to the next generation, is by letting go. And so it's very similar to any kind of transition, but just thinking about it particularly from this lens of relationships and trust. And so to your point, like when it's done well, it's a huge gift. It's a huge gift.
Magical.
And and it's, again, it's not only adding value, but it's protecting the value, because if you don't do it, what are you handing over? You know, something that is on this crumbly foundation. So it almost feels like, I often use the metaphor of like a Jenga game where you're like pushing out, what can
little by little by little,
have the tower stand. Like that's not
that's a great one.
Approaching succession. You want to kind of hand over that solid tower with all the pieces in place.
Absolutely. Well, and also, to add to that, just the idea that when you are that steward and you've been that for so long as that owner, founder, and transitioner, you do have to let go. And your goal is to create and help support and help the next steward of the business be healthy and happy and do it really well. And that transition, that behavioral transition, is hard because they have to be ready and want to take that on and also be on top of this brand strategy too. I always say this is a team sport. Right? This is not an individual sport. Running and building and, as a leader, you can lead it on your own. You can make decisions on your own. You can do that on your own, of course, with a supportive team and including your leadership team and doing all that. But, as that owner founder, everything really stops with you. When you get into this kind of this part of the game of business, you really are doing it with someone else and teaching them to then be that leader owner and, have the stewardship on their shoulders instead of yours. It's just a huge behavioral and mindset and everything shift. Big deal.
Yeah.
Big deal.
For sure.
Hard.
Yeah. Not easy work at all.
Not easy work. Well, you've got your work cut out for you, I can tell. But, gosh, our time, I say this every single time, it goes so fast because I love all these conversations. They're just wonderful. And, one, I am very grateful that you have been here with us. And I always want to ask a final question. I want to know if you could leave one thing with our audience today. What one thing would you like them to walk away with that you think would help them the most?
I think overall it's to be thinking about this connection between brand strategy, positioning strategy, kind of how do we win at the marketplace, and understand that that is the reputation that you're holding on to. And so if you don't figure out how to turn that into a system, turn that into something that can be transferable and passed on, then again, you're kind of undercutting this very thing that you're trying to protect. So I think just understanding this concept of brand equals reputation, I think is a huge head shift for people and really helps them start to think about whether it's behaviors that they have differently or even just the value of what great positioning can bring, great storytelling can bring to their business.
That's awesome. Very well said, Meghan. So again, thank you so much for your time today and for being here with us and for sharing all of your knowledge, and appreciate you. And so, Meghan, how do our listeners find you if they're interested in knowing more?
For sure. So I am quite active on LinkedIn. So Meghan Lynch on LinkedIn. I think it's like M.E. Lynch is my handle. I also do a podcast of my own with my son, Henry, on generational leadership. He's 9. So he always asks some fun wild card questions. So definitely I can check out some of those episodes. And then our company website is 6-Point Strategy, SIXPOINT strategy.com.
Awesome. Well, if you're interested, check out Meghan's website and all of her stuff and her podcast. And thank you again.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Appreciate the conversation.
Take care.
All right, bye.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Business Transition Roadmap. If you're ready to start shaping your own transition strategy, which I'm really hoping that you are, our team at the Transition Strategists would love to offer you a free discovery strategy session where you can explore what might be good for you and just some new ideas. We've got a new perspective and a new approach with people first. And a lot of what we talk about, nobody has ever really done before. So I want to encourage you to think about that and to go to transitionstrategist.com/discovery to schedule your call if you are even curious. It's free, no pressure. We'd love to talk to you. And by the way, if you're a successor or if you've got one in your business, you'll also want to check out for sure Your Next Gen Friend, A Successor's Guide to Business Transition. It's a podcast that's hosted by my successor, Andrea Carpenter. She's incredible. And this one is specifically designed for rising leaders in family businesses. So thanks again for listening. I'll see you next time on the Business Transition Roadmap.